Hello everyone and welcome to the School of Serenity. Social anxiety is a challenging mental health issue that can be caused by many factors including genetics, past traumas, and environmental circumstances. Regardless of its root causes, social anxiety is perpetuated by habitual negative thought patterns that prevent the individual from participating in social activities. In this video, I want to highlight 5 cognitive biases that contribute to these negative thinking patterns. My intention is not to criticize anyone, but to help highlight these biases so that you can address them if you are dealing with social anxiety. I believe that the first step in overcoming social anxiety is developing an awareness of these cognitive distortions. Number 1, confirmation bias and anchoring bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, focus on, and remember information in a way that confirms one's preconceptions. We all have existing beliefs that are familiar and comfortable to maintain. Confirmation bias states that people tend to willfully concentrate on ideas and information that reaffirm their pre-existing beliefs. For example, a person with social anxiety will focus only on uncomfortable encounters that they have had recently with other people, or they will only read blogs and only watch videos that confirm their pre-existing ideas that society is a hostile place to be in. Another related cognitive bias is congruence bias, which is the tendency to avoid testing possible alternative hypotheses. For example, a person with social anxiety would intentionally dismiss any other explanations for their experiences. For instance, if someone makes eye contact with them, they will assume that the person is judging them rather than, say, assuming that the person likes them and wants to start a conversation with them. Yet another related cognitive distortion is anchoring bias, and that is the tendency not to revise one's beliefs sufficiently when presented with new evidence. One example would be ignoring to reevaluate the hypothesis that people always have hostile intentions even after frequently meeting nice and polite people. Number 2, egocentric bias and illusion of transparency. Egocentric bias or self-centered bias is to believe that the world revolves around us. In psychology, the tendency to interpret everything that happens to us in a personal way based on the intensity with which it affects us is called egocentric bias. For instance, if someone doesn't respond immediately when we reach out to them, we might think that they did this because of something that we have done. In reality, this could have happened because of many reasons that had nothing to do with us. Maybe that person was having a bad day or was sick or didn't have access to their phone. In other words, people do not make all decisions based on their perception of us. Another kind of egocentric bias is the illusion of transparency, which is the tendency for people to overestimate the degree to which their personal mental state is known by others and to overestimate how well they understand others' personal mental states. For example, a person with social anxiety might think that their anxiety and uncomfort are evident and transparent to others and thereby become even more anxious around other people. But in reality, many people who we interact with are completely unaware of what is going on in our heads. Other people too are mostly concerned about their own mental state rather than ours. Number 3, intentionality bias and hostile attribution bias. Intentionality bias is a form of attribution bias, and it is the tendency to judge human action to be intentional rather than accidental. In other words, we assume that things other people do are all planned and premeditated. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Almost 90% of our actions are driven by subconscious tendencies. On top of that, we all need to react to random events that life throws at us from time to time. A closely related cognitive bias is the hostile attribution bias, which is the tendency to interpret others' behaviors as having hostile intent, even when the behavior is ambiguous or benign. Things that other people do are more likely to be friendly or neutral rather than malicious. We must understand that other people are also dealing with the same kind of issues we experience. There are indeed mean people out there, but most people are decent. Number 4, availability heuristic and availability bias. Availability bias is the tendency to overestimate the likelihood of events with greater availability in memory, which can be influenced by how recent the memories are or how unusual or emotionally charged they may be. For example, social rejection is a very painful experience for anyone, and particularly for people who suffer from social anxiety. Any such experience carries a lot of emotional charge that distorts our ability to logically estimate the likelihood of its occurrence in the future. Therefore, people who suffer from social anxiety tend to avoid social settings because they're rare unpleasant experiences in the past. In other words, they might overestimate the likelihood of experiencing similar social rejections in the future. Number 5, halo effect and cheerleader effect. Halo effect is a form of association fallacy, and that is the tendency for a person's positive or negative traits to spill over from one personality area to another in others' perception of them. For instance, people who suffer from social anxiety tend to undervalue their own self-worth as a person just because they're not skilled in socializing. In other words, they allow one aspect of their personality to negatively overshadow all their other positive attributes. On top of that, people with social anxiety tend to overestimate how happy and successful their more social peers are. These kinds of comparisons obviously lead to imposter syndrome, which worsens the symptoms of social anxiety. Another related cognitive bias is cheerleader effect, which is the tendency for people to appear more attractive in a group than in isolation. In other words, we perceive people who are better at socializing as more attractive. Therefore, many people with social anxiety wrongly assume that their peers are way more attractive than they actually are because they always hang out with lots of friends and post pictures on social media. I hope that you like my video about 5 cognitive biases that cause social anxiety. If you have any comments or any suggestions, please add them in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my future videos. Stay serene, take care, thank you.